About 3 to 10% of the women of reproductive age group, they have this problem of endometriosis. So when we look at the reproductive age group women who are presenting with complaints of pelvic pain, about 12 to 32% of these women will have endometriosis. And when we look at women presenting with infertility and endometriosis, about 9 to 50% of these patients will have endometriosis. So it's a significant burden to the for infertility to face endometriosis. So the main problem, what are the main challenges which we have in endometriosis is diagnostic delays. So quite often this is present from adolescent age group itself, but there is a delay in the diagnosis of this condition. Quite often we see girls presenting with pelvic pain or menstrual disturbances, and we don't think about endometriosis. So adolescent endometriosis is a topic by itself, but there is the main challenge is the diagnosis of the condition. So recent reports, particularly from Europe, it has shown that there is an overall diagnostic delay of about 10 years from studies in Germany and Austria. There's a delay of about 8 years from studies which have come from UK and Spain, and 6.7 years delay in Norway. So on an average, we would say there is a 7 to 10 years delay from the time of the disease to the diagnosis of the condition. So because the patients with endometriosis, they could be asymptomatic, and the most common symptoms which these patients will present with is 1, pain, and 2, infertility. These are the most common symptoms which the patients come to us. Today we will be focusing mostly on the patients which are presenting to the fertility centers with endometriosis. So about 50% of the women who present to us with infertility, there is a possibility of endometriosis, which we should always keep in mind. What is the main impact of endometriosis on fertility? Because one is the chronic inflammation, due to which there can be possibility of distortion of the pelvic anatomy. The uterotubal relationship can be disturbed, and this may alter the uterotubal transport. The endometrium has reduced endometrial receptivity, which could impair the implantation. The ovarian reserve is reduced in these patients, and the oocyte quality and embryo quality is compromised. So these are the various effects which the endometriosis can have. So it has an effect at the level of the ovary, at the level of the tube, at the level of the uterus. So endometriosis is a very enigmatic condition, and infertility, it can affect at all the levels: ovary, tube, uterus, endometrial lining, everywhere. Now look at the staging of the endometriosis. The American Fertility Society has classified endometriosis into 4 stages depending upon the extent of the disease. Stage 1 is where there is isolated implants with no significant adhesion. And these are implants which are superficial and less than 5 centimeters in size. This is minimal to mild disease. Stage 2 is moderate disease, where there are multiple implants, both superficial and deep. These are more than 5 centimeters in size. There is peritubal and periovarian adhesions, and there is a possibility of small endometriomas less than 4 centimeters in size. Coming to stage 3 or severe disease, where there are multiple superficial and deep implants, ovarian endometriomas which are more than 4 centimeters in size, and there could be peritubal and periovarian adhesions. The adhesions can be flimsy adhesions, or dense adhesions also can be present. Stage 4 is advanced and extensive disease with rectovaginal infiltrates, and there is frozen pelvis. So the staging of the condition is very important for the management of the patient. So the management varies depending upon the stage of the disease. So this is just a picture depicting the various stages: the minimal, mild, moderate, and the severe disease depending upon the extent of the disease. So now coming to the diagnosis. What could be the diagnosis is, one, we can do an ultrasound as a routine. Whenever a patient with infertility presents to our clinic, we do an ultrasound normally to evaluate the uterus and the ovary broadly. So when you do an ultrasound, you can see ovarian endometrioma. An ultrasound is not very good for diagnosis of peritoneal lesions, not a very good tool. And sometimes when you do a transvaginal ultrasound, you can identify or rule out rectal endometriosis. Even when you do a vaginal examination, you can see rectal, you can see the nodules, the uterosacral nodules can be felt even on your per vaginal or per rectal examination. MRI is useful for the detection and differentiation of ovarian endometrioma from other cystic ovarian masses. But for peritoneal lesions, again, only 30 to 40% of the peritoneal lesions can be identified by a MRI. So routinely in patients with endometriosis, we do not advise so often a MRI unless we want to know the deep extent of the disease. Coming to the management of these patients with infertility. So when you have a patient with endometriosis and presents with infertility, let's see what is the role of medical therapy or surgical therapy or the advanced reproductive technology techniques. What is available to us and when should we apply which mode of treatments. So the fertility management, when the patient comes to you, the first thing is you have to do the infertility workup should be done to rule out any other associated cause of infertility other than endometriosis. The treatment of the patient again depends on various factors. The age of the patient, the extent of the disease from stage 1 to 4, the staging of the disease, the duration of infertility, if the patient has any previous surgeries for endometriosis or any other previous fertility treatments, the priority of the patient and the cost of treatment, and any other associated infertility factors such as associated tubal factor infertility or male factor infertility. So all of these things should be kept in mind when you plan the treatment for the patient. So now let us see is there any role for medical treatment in these patients with fertility? So in infertile women with endometriosis, there is no role for any hormonal treatment for suppression of ovarian function to improve the fertility. So this was in Cochrane database review in 2007. It says that in women who are planning for fertility treatment, there is no role of hormonal suppression to improve the fertility. Then again, the ESHRE guidelines in 2013 on endometriosis, they say that in women with infertility and endometriosis, there is no role of any adjunct hormonal treatment before surgery to improve the spontaneous pregnancy rate, because there is no suitable evidence for this. So there is no role of adjuvant hormonal therapy. So again in 2004, this study from Furness that supports this, that in women with endometriosis and fertility treatment, there is no role of any adjunct hormonal treatment after surgery to improve the spontaneous pregnancy rate. So once you've done the surgery, there is no role that we put the patient on any further hormonal treatment, because following the surgery, the endometriotic disease is very well corrected and it's better to move on for fertility treatment, because we know that endometriosis is a condition which is recurrent. The patient can get the disease back again in few years' time. We cannot predict how long she will be disease free. It can be few months or few years, we don't know. So it's better to go for active fertility treatment immediately after the surgery rather than wasting time. So now when you look at surgery, the gold standard surgery for diagnosis or treatment of endometriosis is laparoscopy. So whether the laparoscopic approach is better or open surgery or laparotomy is better. So laparoscopic approach in the management of endometriosis is preferred over laparotomy. And why laparoscopy? Because it has benefits of magnification and illumination. There is a shorter hospital stay, faster post-operative recovery, less pain relief, less analgesic requirement, and less morbidity. So always, whenever you're dealing with patients with endometriosis, the best approach is the laparoscopic approach. And this study in 1998, it shows that they compared the laparotomy with laparoscopy. the results were similar in terms of the pregnancy rate, the fecundity, or the cyst recurrence. So both laparoscopy and laparotomy has similar pregnancy rate and risk of recurrence of the disease, but laparoscopy has an added advantage over laparotomy. So whenever we are talking about doing a laparoscopy, the various procedures what we may have to do in endometriosis is either ablation or excision of the endometriotic implant. We may need to do adhesiolysis or ovarian cystectomy. These are the most often surgeries which we do in laparoscopy. So this is a very nice study from Canada. It's a Canadian trial called as the EndoCan study, where they had included 341 women with infertility who has minimal to moderate endometriosis. The pregnancy rate was 36.6% in these women who underwent laparoscopy with ablation of the peritoneal implants, and the pregnancy rate was 21.9% in the women who underwent only a diagnostic laparoscopy. They found that resection and ablation group have higher likelihood of pregnancy compared to diagnostic laparoscopy. So whenever you're doing a laparoscopy, a diagnostic laparoscopy in couples with in women with infertility, in women with infertility, there is always the resection or the ablation of the endometriotic implant. If you see, she's going to benefit from the surgery better. And Jacobson and his group in 2010 said that in infertile women with ASRM stage 1 to 2 endometriosis, operative laparoscopy where there is excision or ablation of the endometriotic lesion, including adhesiolysis, there was increased ongoing pregnancy rate compared to doing diagnostic laparoscopy alone. So in always in stage 1 to 2 endometriosis, the patient is going to benefit. The other procedure which we often do is treatment of an ovarian endometrioma or the chocolate cyst. Whenever you're doing a surgery for a chocolate cyst, either it can be an excision of the cyst capsule or drainage and electrocoagulation of the cyst wall. So always excision of the cyst is superior to drainage and coagulation of the cyst wall. And whenever you're doing the surgery for endometrioma, you have to counsel the woman that post-surgery, there is a possibility of reduced ovarian reserve. And always rule out a malignancy. However, the risk of malignancy in ovarian endometrioma is only 0.8%. So do all patients who are going to have a further advanced treatment for endometriosis, do we have to subject all of these patients for surgery? So let us look at what does evidence say that whether we should be operating prior to fertility treatments in these women with endometriosis, or should we go for fertility treatment? So in 2014, Dunsel and his group showed that women who had previous ovarian surgeries and they went for IVF, they had longer days of stimulation, they had higher FSH requirement, they have decreased oocyte numbers collection. However, there was no difference in the fertilization rate and pregnancy outcome in the subsequent ART cycles. So there is more gonadotrophin requirement, more number of days of stimulation is what these patients will end up with because of the reduced ovarian reserve following the surgery. Then in 2004, from the studies by the Velasco group, there was no significant difference between the pregnancy rate in 133 women who underwent surgery for endometrioma before IVF and those 56 women who proceeded directly to IVF without prior removal of the endometriotic cyst. So in these women, whether they removed the endometriotic cyst or they did not remove the endometriotic cyst, there was no difference in the pregnancy rate. It was 25% in the group which underwent the surgery and 22% in the group which was where endometriotic surgery was not done. So this group again in 2009 from these studies concluded that it is better to proceed to IVF directly to avoid the complications which are related to surgery, reduced time to pregnancy, and reduced cost. So whenever we are talking about fertility treatments, it's important that you have to reduce the time to pregnancy and reduce the cost to the treatment as well. In another group in 2006, they said that 99 patients with endometrioma who were scheduled for an ICSI cycle, they were allocated to either conservative surgery before ICSI or immediately ICSI without any prior surgery. In this group also, there was no significant difference in fertilization rate, implantation rate, or pregnancy rate. So is it always we are going to operate an endometrioma to improve the pregnancy rate itself, or is there any other reason, any other indication to remove the endometrioma prior to proceeding to IVF? So the likelihood of conception is not the only factor which we need to take into consideration before advocating the surgery prior to IVF. Because endometrioma, when the diameter is more than 4 centimeters, it can create difficulties with your oocyte retrieval. So when you're doing the egg collection, there can be difficulties. The cyst may get punctured, and there is a subsequent possible rupture post-surgery also. There's always a risk of infection, and there is a risk of contamination of your follicular fluid with the endometriotic fluid. So this was by a group in 2006 by Somigliana group. So now when do we operate an endometrioma? So it's a big question that whether we should operate an endometrioma prior to doing IVF or not. So ESHRE in 2013, it has come up with its guidelines. What do they say is, in women with infertility presenting with endometrioma, if it is more than 3 centimeters in size, then there is an evidence that cystectomy prior to treatment with ART improves the pregnancy rate. So clinicians should counsel these women who are undergoing surgery regarding the risk of reduced ovarian function following the surgery, and there is a possibility of the loss of the ovary. And the decision to proceed to surgery should be considered carefully if the woman has had a previous ovarian surgery. This is also very important. A woman who have had previous ovarian surgeries, we should not be subjecting them to repeated surgeries. Again, that's going to further reduce the ovarian reserve. Then 2011, this group said that the effectiveness of the surgical excision of deep nodular lesions for the treatment prior to treatment with ART in women with endometriosis associated infertility is not well established with regard to the reproductive outcome. So when the patients present with grade 4 endometriosis, where there is a frozen pelvis, rectovaginal nodules and infiltrates, in those women with deep infiltrating endometriosis, should it be treated prior to fertility treatment? No, there is not much evidence to say that these lesions have to be treated to improve the reproductive outcome prior to the IVF treatment. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of removing an endometrioma prior to the surgery? So advantages are: 1, preventing the possible rupture of the endometrioma, facilitation of the oocyte retrieval, detection of an occult malignancy, avoidance of the contamination of the follicular fluid with endometrioma content, and prevention of the progress of endometriosis. What are the disadvantages of doing the surgery are: surgical trauma, complication of doing the surgery, economic cost, you're adding to the already costly treatments, potential decreased ovarian response, and lack of evidence for improved IVF pregnancy rates. So whenever you're doing a surgery, what are the intraoperative steps which we need to take to prevent the complications for you're doing an ovarian endometrioma? So it's very important that you preserve the vascular blood supply to the ovary, because a proper blood supply is vital for the preservation of the ovarian volume and ovarian reserve. You have to have strict adherence to the principles of microsurgery, removal of all visible areas of endometriotic disease. The plane of dissection between the cyst wall and the normal ovarian tissue should be identified very clearly in order to avoid inadvertent injury to the normal ovarian tissue. During ediciolysis and release of the ovary from the ovarian fossa, you have to be very careful about the ureters. Quite often, the ovary may be entangled at the tube. There will be a tubo-ovarian complex which may be attached to the lateral pelvic wall. So you always have to be very careful. Identify the ureters on the lateral pelvic wall before you release the ovaries from the ovarian fossa. Very important to avoid spillage of these endometriotic contents as they increase the risk of recurrence of the disease, and it increases the risk of formation of adhesions. We should try to use electrocautery as less as possible. Some people, they use vasopressin for hydrodissection as well. So this is a group in 2004 which talked about the surgery, about is there a role of cyst for the aspiration of the ovarian endometrioma. So instead of removing the endometrioma, this is an RCT which was done on the effect of aspiration of ovarian endometrioma before the surgery. So 41 women were allocated to cyst aspiration at the beginning of ovarian stimulation, whereas 40 women were had endometrioma aspiration as control. They did not undergo endometrioma aspiration. So number of oocytes retrieved as well as the fertilization rate, implantation and pregnancy rate was similar. So there's not much role of aspiration. Now there were a few studies which looked at surgery and the effect on the AMH or the anti-Mullerian hormone levels in these patients. So there was a meta-analysis of 11 studies which said that there was a statistically significant reduction of the serum AMH levels following the surgery. And it was more in women with bilateral endometrioma. So this is a study from Fertility Sterility in 2012. Then another study again in Fertility Sterility in 2013. It looked at about 65 women who were included in this study. AMH decreased significantly at 6 months in these patients, and AMH levels decline was more evident when the cyst was less than 5 centimeters in size, and AMH decline was more in patients who had bilateral endometrioma compared to the women who had unilateral endometrioma. So we should be very careful when we operate the women with endometrioma. We have to take into consideration the size of the endometrioma, whether it's unilateral or bilateral, and if the patient had previous surgeries. So coming to the fertility treatment per se, so the ESHRE guidelines and few other studies from Taman and Nelson and his group, it says that in infertile women with ASRM stage 1 to 2 endometriosis, IUI with controlled ovarian stimulation instead of expected management increases the live birth rate. So instead of going for expected management, IUI along with controlled ovarian stimulation should be encouraged in these patients. And in infertile women with stage 1 to 2 endometriosis, IUI with controlled ovarian stimulation instead of IUI alone increases the pregnancy rate. So if you are going for IUI, it is always better we do ovarian stimulation rather than natural cycle IUI. And when you are going for ovarian stimulation, gonadotrophins in IUI results in a higher clinical pregnancy rate compared to CC and IUI. So a longitudinal study showed there was a 5 times higher pregnancy rate in couples receiving IUI after controlled ovarian stimulation with gonadotrophins compared to IUI alone. So compared to the expected management, IUI is better, and when you're doing the IUI, it is better to go for a gonadotrophin stimulation to maximize the results. But when you're going for the gonadotrophin stimulation, we have to be very mindful about the risk of multiple pregnancy and OHSS. So endometriosis and infertility have a decreased per cycle conception compared to male factor and unexplained infertility. Also, repetitive superovulation with IUI of up to 3 to 4 cycles, they may have a plateau effect over time. So a timely decision for IVF should be considered. So in these women who are going for IUI, if it is, so the conception chances when the indication is endometriosis is lower compared to when you're doing it for an unexplained infertility or male factor. So somebody who is going for an IUI for a male factor infertility or an unexplained infertility or endometriosis, the chances of conception are least when the indication is endometriosis. Then again in 2016, an RCT compared the pregnancy rate following superovulation between letrozole and CC in stage 1 to 2 endometriosis. There was no significant difference was found between both groups for clinical pregnancy rate per cycle, cumulative pregnancy rate, miscarriage rate, or live birth rate. So when you're using oral ovulagens for ovulation induction in patients with endometriosis, choice of clomiphene or letrozole, both of them are equally good. So now, when do we move on to IVF? So we talked about IUI, what are the indications? Again, all other factors need to be taken into consideration when you're deciding for IUI or IVF. The age of the patient, the extent of the disease, the duration of infertility, her ovarian reserve, and if there is associated male factor infertility. So when do we move on to IVF in these patients is when ART should be recommended, especially if the tubal function is compromised or there is a male factor infertility or other treatments have failed to achieve a pregnancy. In patients presenting with grade 3 or 4 endometriosis, IVF ICSI is the first option which should be recommended. In grade 1 to 2 endometriosis, if there is no conception, even after superovulation and IUI for 3 to 4 cycles, in these women, we have to move on for IVF. This is according to the ESHRE guidelines in 2013. And when we are subjecting these women to IVF ICSI, there is always a question that if these fertility treatments, do they increase the risk of recurrence of this disease? So this is a very nice study in 2011 and 2010, which showed that there was no increase in the endometriosis recurrence rate after controlled ovarian stimulation for IVF or ICSI. Then in 2008, Benaglia and his group said that although the risk of ovarian abscess following follicular aspiration is low, antibiotic prophylaxis at the time of oocyte retrieval can be considered. So all these women, whenever we are going for egg pickup, it should always be covered with an antibiotic, and we always should try to avoid puncturing the ovarian endometrioma. This is going to cause contamination of your follicular fluid, and it also increases the risk of infection and formation of an ovarian abscess. So in 2006, Salem and his group recommended that GnRH agonists, it can be prescribed for about 3 to 6 months prior to ART treatment to improve the clinical pregnancy rate in infertile women with endometriosis. So in patients with endometriosis, when you're going to go for IVF, prior to that, if you give them 3 months of GnRH agonist, it's going to give you a little bit better pregnancy rate. Then in 2002, Barnhart and his groups, it was a systematic review which indicated that the pregnancy rate was lower in endometriosis patients undergoing IVF treatment with ovarian stimulation compared to women with tubal factor infertility. So when you're going to do IVF for endometriosis or IVF for tubal factor infertility, the pregnancy rates are lower in the women who had IVF with an indication of endometriosis. So this included about 22 studies consisting of about 2,377 IVF cycles in women with endometriosis and about around 4,000 cycles in women who did not have endometriosis. So the pregnancy rate in women with stage 1 to 2 endometriosis was not significantly different from those women who underwent for tubal factor. But the pregnancy rate in women with stage 3 to 4 were significantly lower than the tubal factor. So the stage of the disease is also important. So if you do it in stage 1 to 2 IVF, your pregnancy rate is going to be better when you do IVF in stage 3 and 4 disease. Then this is another study which looked at pooling of the cycle. In patients with low ovarian reserve, they looked at embryo pooling. So significantly lower pregnancy rate per fresh embryo transfer after pooling of 1 to 4 IVF cycle in women with endometriosis of stage 3 to 4. The pregnancy rate was 22%. Compared to stage 1 to 2, it was 40%, so almost double. And if it was done for tubal factor infertility, the pregnancy rate was 36%. So it was in par with stage 1 to 2 disease. And then after 1 to 4 IVF ICSI treatments, which included FET transfers or frozen embryo transfer, women with stage 3 to 4 disease had pregnancy rate and live birth rate, which was about 56 to 40%. Whereas in cases for stage 1, the pregnancy rate was 67% and live birth rate of 55%. But in patients with tubal factor, it was 81% pregnancy rate and 43% live birth rate. So this study concluded that in stage 3 to 4 endometriosis, there was worse prognosis for IVF ICSI treatment compared to milder stage disease or tubal factor infertility. So when you are looking at doing your fertility treatments, which protocols you would like to choose. So 2007, this group said that GnRH agonist protocol is good to be recommended if the patients had good ovarian reserve. Agonist protocol may result in more M2 oocytes and embryos. In women with low ovarian reserve, antagonist protocol was preferred. But when they compared the agonist to antagonist protocol, there was similar implantation rate and clinical pregnancy rate. Now, talking about if there is any role of fertility preservation in these patients with endometriosis. Patients with endometriosis, they should be counseled about not to delay their first pregnancy. And when this is not a realistic option for them, we should talk about fertility preservation in them. So nowadays, because of earlier diagnosis, we are looking at even adolescent girls with endometriosis. So we need to talk to these women with endometriosis that they should not delay their pregnancy. But for some reasons, because of career or because they are not nowadays, because of late marriages. So if the woman is not going to be getting married till her mid-30s, then she has to look into the option of fertility preservation. So fertility preservation can be offered to women even with mild endometriosis if they have reduced ovarian reserve and if they are in the older reproductive age group. It should also be considered before an extensive or bilateral pelvic surgery for endometriosis, and in those women if they are not planning immediate conception after the surgery. So there are sometimes indications that we can go for stimulation, collect the eggs, make embryos and freeze them. After this, you can do the surgery and then plan the embryo transfer. So this was a study which looked at oocyte vitrification for fertility preservation. The mean age for vitrification was around 35 years. So when they, after freezing the eggs, when they looked at the oocyte survival rate and the cumulative live birth rate for these women who came back again for using their oocytes, they found that the oocyte survival rate was about 83% and a cumulative live birth rate of 46%. And the number of vitrified oocytes per cycle was higher for the non-surgical patients compared to the patients who had unilateral or bilateral ovarian surgeries prior to the egg collection. So performing surgery after ovarian stimulation for fertility preservation is a good option. So these women can undergo a stimulation cycle, collect the eggs, and then they can go for surgery so that the ovarian reserve is not compromised in these people. So this was a very recent study from Fertility Sterility in 2020. So now we're coming to the end of our presentation. So just to conclude, I will just put together a few points. So with endometriosis, the main challenge is the delay in the diagnosis, which leads to severe impact on the quality of life of the women, and it has a significant cost to the society. Laparoscopy is the gold standard for diagnosis of endometriosis. We should not offer hormonal treatment to women with endometriosis who are trying to conceive, because it is not going to improve your spontaneous pregnancy rate. In fact, you will be delaying the onset of fertility treatment in this patient. And whenever you're thinking about any fertility treatment, it depends on the age of the patient, the staging of the disease, any other associated fertility factors. So in stage 1 to 2 disease, IUI with controlled ovarian stimulation instead of expectant management is the best option. When moderate to severe disease with prior 1 or more fertility operations, IVF embryo transfer is a better therapeutic option than other fertility treatments. There is some role of using GnRH agonists for a period of 3 to 6 months prior to treatment with ART techniques. Ovarian endometriomas larger than 3 centimeters. There is no evidence that ovarian endometrioma surgeries should be offered only if they are more than 3 centimeters in size. As such, less than 3 centimeters or 3 centimeters, it is not going to improve your pregnancy rate. And better to avoid recurrent surgery in patients with endometriosis. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. Shweta. I'm Sanju Yadav, heading this business unit of WHC for Samarth Life Sciences. And on behalf of Samarth Life Sciences, really heartfelt thanks to you and all the participating doctors for taking out this time. Now we have some time for the question and answers, though we have a lot of questions in the chat box. Once we take those, anybody who would like to ask a question can also unmute themselves and ask live also. So Dr. Gurunath, if you can just take ahead the questions with.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for such a nice presentation. There is a question from Dr. Soumya Soni. If a chocolate cyst accidentally gets ruptured during the surgery and spillage occurs in the peritoneal cavity, what should be done for that?
So there is definitely a possibility that the chocolate cyst can get ruptured. Normally what I recommend is initially when you're trying to remove, just take a small nick and then put your suction inside the cyst and suck all the contents to avoid spilling of the content is one. Second, as you asked, if the cyst is already ruptured, then you have to give a good pelvic wash. Other than that, there is not much we can do if it has ruptured. We can go for the next question.
Yes, doctor. And also to this same question, Dr. Ramani Devi has also answered, saying that accidental rupture wash can be also washed with the saline.
The pelvic wash has to be given, yes.
Okay, doctor. Another question is whether if you can elaborate regarding which energy source to be used during laparoscopy for stage 4 endometriosis.
See, stage 4 endometriosis is where there is a rectovaginal involvement. In stage 4 endometriosis, it is always to be done, there should be a multidisciplinary approach. Always with the rectovaginal and stage 4 endometriosis, it is always best that a gynecologist should be operating with a very experienced surgeon. Quite often in these, there is a rectal involvement, rectal nodules, patients might need resection, bowel resection and all might be needed in this grade 4 endometriosis. So it's a multidisciplinary approach and we should try to use less of the coagulation in these cases.
Thank you, doctor. Another question is if you can clarify the exact dose of GnRH agonist, when and how to give.
So with the GnRH agonist, what I try to do is we use the depot, GnRH agonist depot, the 3.6 milligram depot monthly for 3 months, and then put the patient through IVF. If the reserve is good, we do it that way. And if the reserve is very less, maybe 1 or 2 months is enough.
Okay, doctor, thank you. Is there also any role of HSG like flushing of tubes? HCG maybe. HCG is what.
Flushing of the tubes for what?
Use of HSG for flushing of tubes.
There is no role of flushing of the tubes and endometriosis, no.
Okay. What
Ma'am, there is,
antibiotics? Dr. Gurunath, you are online now?
yes, yes, I am.
Yes, you can hear.
Ma'am,
You can hear now.
yeah. What type of energy you use for ablation of superficial endometriosis at peritoneal surface?
Yeah, we try to see either whenever there are superficial endometriosis, either you will go for excision or ablation. Ablation, you can use your bipolar cautery. Bipolar coagulation of the endometriotic lesions can be done.
And one question missed earlier is what antibiotics do you give, ma'am, if contents get ruptured?
You cover with some broad spectrum antibiotics where there is a rupture. You can use like cefixime and all. Cefixime with metrogil. That is more than enough.
There is one question from Dr. Saraf. He is asking, you have mentioned that use of GnRH treatment in endometriotic.
Can you be little
prior
loud?
to-
I cannot hear. Sorry, Dr. Sunil. Can you be little loud?
Hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gurunath.
Yeah. So Dr. Sarab is asking, you mentioned that we can start GnRH treatment in endometriotic patient prior to IVF trial.
Yes.
So what dose we can start, and if there is no ovulation, can we raise the dose?
See, the GnRH agonist, what you're giving, see, when you do a surgery with endometriosis, there is superficial and deep lesions. So when you're operating for endometriosis, we can remove the lesions which are superficial, which are visible, but there could be a lot of endometriotic disease which is deep. So the role of giving this GnRH agonist is to treat the deep endometriotic disease, which is not visible. So you're not looking for ovulation in GnR. When you're giving GnRH agonist, you're giving it for the suppression of the disease. You're not giving it for ovulation. So if you give this GnRH agonist, you're not going to look for ovulation. You just give it for the suppression of the disease. And after 3 months, then you can go for stimulation for your IVF, whatever protocol you have, and you can do the IVF for this patient. So you're not going to look for ovulation when the patient is on agonist.
One doctor is asking, can you elaborate on antagonist protocol?
Antagonist protocol is on the day 2 of the cycle, you do your basic E2, P4 and LH, and then you start your gonadotrophins depending upon the age of the patient, her BMI and the ovarian reserve, if she is smoking or not, if there is previous stimulation, what doses were used. Then you give the patients the gonadotrophins, and then you call the patient on day 5 after 4 or 5 days of stimulation to see the size of the follicle. And at that time, if the follicle is more than or equal to 14 mm, we start the antagonist. We call the patient regularly every 2 or 3 days until the follicles are, at least you have 3 or more follicles of 17 mm. That's when you do the trigger and plan the ovum pickup.
One of the doctors is asking, what is the starting dose of FSH in IVF for stage 3 endometriosis?
See, it doesn't depend. The dose of your FSH does not depend upon the stage of endometriosis, whether it's stage 1, 2, 3 or 4. The dose of gonadotrophins which you are going to use in your IVF cycle depends upon the age of the patient, her antral follicle count, her AMH, her BMI, if she is smoking or not, and if she had any previous stimulation, what dose was used. So the dose of gonadotrophin doesn't depend upon the stage of endometriosis.
Okay. In between, we are getting lots of comments, ma'am. If was an amazing and beautiful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of the question doctor is asking, how to deal with the recurrent endometriosis in a patient with pain and anxious to conceive.
See, recurrent endometriosis, we have to be very conservative, particularly when fertility is the issue. Okay, so with pain, the medical management works quite well, and nowadays we have Dynogest, which is coming up. So Dynogest works quite well when there is a pain, but then you have to balance between the pain and fertility treatment. Somebody who is desiring fertility treatment, you will not put her on Dynogest. You have to look for active fertility treatment. So you have to balance her pain as well as the desire to fertility treatment. And based on that, you have to take a call. You have to talk to the patient that if pain is so severe, then you will have to do either a surgery or medical therapy. And once her pain symptoms have settled, you will focus on the fertility treatment. But if the pain is controllable, it is to an extent that she can bear it, it is better to complete the fertility treatment and then look at the pain management. Because see, the fertility is very much dependent on the age. If you're going to focus on other things and ignore fertility, she will have problems later on in conceiving. So I would focus first on fertility and then pain. One option is you go for ovarian stimulation, collect her eggs, create the embryos and freeze her embryos. So you have already got her embryos available, then manage the pain, and later on, once the things are settled, she can go for embryo transfer and plan pregnancy. So it all depends on individual. You have to sit and talk to the patient, give all these options, and every patient has a different mindset. So depending on what she desires, you can offer that treatment to her.
One of the doctor is asking how you can find the plane between endometrioma and ovarian tissue, because usually it is a part of the wall.
Yeah, see, it will not be. See, if you normally what I try to do is take a nick, try to absorb the contents by putting a suction into the cyst. And when you have with the laparoscopic surgeries, because of the magnification, it is usually not very difficult to identify the plane between the cyst wall and the normal ovarian tissue. And then with the you should gradually separate the cyst wall from the normal ovarian tissue and remove the cyst wall as much as possible to reduce the risk of recurrence. Quite often, when you come to the hilum, at that point, the cyst wall is very much adherent. So at that point, you can probably cut the tissue, cut and remove the cyst wall and coagulate with electrocoagulation that small area of the cyst wall which is close to the hilum. Sometimes hydrodissection can help. Sometimes when you inject the normal saline between the wall and the normal ovarian tissue, this hydrodissection sometimes in difficult cases helps in identification of the cyst wall. Some people even use vasopressin injection to help to get a better differentiation of the wall.
Ma'am, what is the cutoff size for endometriotic cyst above which you advise surgical management of cyst?
Yeah, see, surgical, anything more than 4, nowadays the ESHRE guidelines have, of 2013, and then the ASRM guidelines, they all say that any cyst more than or equal to 4 centimeters should be removed. So if it is less than 3 or less than 3, you can leave those cysts and focus on fertility treatment. If the cyst is large, 4 centimeters or more, such a cyst, you can operate and remove it and then go for the surgery. But mind you, again, it depends if it is a recurrent cyst. If you are having recurrent cyst, in those cases, you will be very conservative about the surgery. And then again, it depends on the, if the cyst is on the way, if you think that you're likely to rupture the cyst, or you may have to puncture the cyst when you're doing your ovum pickup. In those cases also, I would prefer to do the surgery before the fertility treatment like IVF. So you have to take it individually, the size, the location, if they had previous surgery, all of those things have to be taken into consideration before you plan the surgery.
Ma'am, what strategy used to avoid recurrence of adhesion after surgery? what strategy to be used to avoid recurrence of adhesions after surgery?
See, a clean and a neat surgery is what is needed. So basically, you do give a good thorough pelvic lavage after the removal of the surgery. Make sure that you do not spill the contents of the endometriotic cyst, and that's all probably which we can do to reduce. And post surgery, give them a good antibiotic cover. That's all we can do to reduce the risk of recurrence. So endometriotic disease, see, it's a enigmatic disease. It's like it's not exactly cancer, but the pain and what patient has to go through is not less than that. So there is a risk of recurrence of the disease. So whenever we operate for endometriosis and fertility is a priority, I would recommend that the patient should go for active fertility treatment soon after the surgery to avoid the risk of to have the maximum advantage of the surgery.
Ma'am, does Dynogest affect the ovarian reserve?
Sorry?
Does Dynogest affect ovarian reserve?
No, Dynogest doesn't show that it affects the ovarian reserve, but because it's a medical management, you're not going to try for pregnancy while on Dynogest because it's a progestins. Patient is not going to get pregnant while on that. So that's the reason you don't want to give somebody who is desiring pregnancy. But as such, no studies have shown that Dynogest reduces the ovarian reserve.
Ma'am, Dr. Soma, Dr. Veena.
Sorry, just can you
Dr. Divya. Yeah, there are many doctors, Dr. Soma, Veena, Dr. Divya. They are thanking you for wonderful session. Dr. Tamani Devi, she has one suggestion. Her suggestion is give GnRH 1 dose followed by pickup. Then give 2 doses and go for frozen embryo transfer.
Yeah, I did talk about it. Yes.
Yeah.
We talked
So
about giving first collecting, then treating the disease, and then going for embryo transfer. Yes.
Okay. So, are there any questions from any other participant? They can ask in the chat box, or they can unmute themselves and ask the question directly.
Good afternoon, madam.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, please unmute yourself and ask the question. Or you can write in the chat box. That is much better way.
Kumar, she is raising her hand for a long time now. If you want to say anything, Dr. Lalita, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself and please ask the question to Dr. Shweta Agrawal, please.
Good afternoon, madam.
Hello, Dr. Lalita.
See, suppose endometrium is 3 centimeters.
Okay.
And we give fertility drugs. So, and suppose she becomes pregnant, will this endometrium increase in size?
No, not really. See, what happens is when you're going to treat endometriosis, you're going to create conditions like pseudo-pregnancy, pseudo-menopause. So this you're going to have high progesterones during your pregnancy. So that is itself going to suppress the disease. So endometrium is probably, the disease is going to get better if the woman is pregnant.
One more question, madam. Please, regarding GnRH agonist, explain once again. GnRH agonist.
Sorry, I didn't get your question, Dr. Lalita.
GnRH agonist.
Yeah.
Treatment, madam, once again.
Yeah, GnRH agonist. See, sometimes you can use GnRH agonist 1, 2, or 3 doses in the depot GnRH agonist depot. You can give about 2 to 3 months prior to the IVF to suppress the disease, and then you can go for IVF.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Sahana is asking a question. What is the dose of Dynogest and for how long to give for the suppression of pain?
See, the Dynogest you can give either, what we do is, if the patient is less than 50 kg, 2 milligrams. If the patient is more than 50 kgs, 2 milligrams. twice a day you can give, and it can be given. There are some studies which have shown that it can be given up to 2, 4 or even 5 years. Okay. So Dynogest you can give easily up to 6 months to 1 year. Definitely you can give. I have given up to 2 years also for suppression of pain. So Dynogest, lots of studies are coming up which are showing that it's a relatively safe drug and it can be given for a long time.
Dr. Nina is raising hand. Dr. Nina, please unmute
Yes.
yourself and ask the question.
Hello.
Dr. Nina.
Yes,
Yeah,
Dr.
ma'am. Please
Nina.
go ahead.
Uh, uh, good good evening, madam. Your lecture was very, very nice. And I want to ask, whenever there is a pregnancy after ART treatment, what precaution we should take during, like sometimes I have seen there is premature labor and the pregnancy, we have lost the pregnancy in such a woman. So what precaution we should take in these patients?
See, with patients with endometriosis, if they get pregnant, the problem, see, any ART treatment pregnancy are slightly high risk pregnancies. So just a routine care, I would say, particularly if they would have had a previous history of preterm labor, what I would do is continue the progesterones for a longer period of time. So there is some evidence to say that you can continue this micronized progesterone and all for a longer time, which may reduce the risk of preterm labor and all. And you have to be a little bit more careful during pregnancies during the pregnancy, and call them more often for antenatal care, and be mindful about these things can possibly happen and take precautions for that. But as such, there is no
Okay.
particularly with endometriosis and pregnancy, not major. In fact, the endometriosis, as I said before, it's going to be better than during, like, as normally when we give these treatments, we are creating a situation of pseudo pregnancy or pseudo menopause. So the condition will get better with pregnancy. It's not going to worsen in pregnancy.
Okay, thank you, madam. And one other query, which agonist you will prefer? Among 3 agonists, which one is preferred by you?
I use
Leuprolide or
Leuprolide acetate I prefer. 3.6
okay.
milligrams monthly depot is what I commonly use.
3.75.
Yeah, sorry, 3.75.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Uh,
Thank you so much.
We can take only couple of questions now. If there are any questions, please go ahead and ask. But only couple of questions because we are running a little late.
I think somebody who is logged in from the name Redmi wants is raising hands. Doctor, please go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask question, please.
Hello.
Hello, yes, doctor. Please introduce.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Shweta Kothari from Ahmedabad.
Yes,
Ma'am, my question is HMG or FSH, which is better, ma'am, for stimulation? Like if we supposingly 35 years female with infertility 5 years and we are going for ovulation induction, ma'am. So the choice of gonadotropin, either it is HMG or FSH, and at what dose, like?
Yeah. See, so it depends, nowadays we are saying with older women and somebody with a lower ovarian reserve, HMG is better than recombinant, is what is the newer guidelines, what they tell us. And even with patients with poor responders and all, the dose what they are telling is to cap it to 300 IU. So somebody who is 35-year-old with lower ovarian reserve, I would prefer to go for HMG.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
One last question we can take. Any doctor want to ask the question?
There are a few questions in the chat box, doctor, if you can consider.
No, that has covered. That has covered. Any other question for Dr. Shweta? Otherwise, we can close the session.
So new question has come up in the chat box. You can take it, please.
Yeah, so there is a question from Dr. Soumya Soni. What should be done to reduce the diagnosis time amongst endometriosis patient? As said, it is approximately 10 years it is present. So what can be done to reduce the diagnosis time?
Yeah. See, that is a very good question. That because see, nowadays we are talking about adolescent endometriosis. So what we have to be mindful. We have to think of the women when they present with chronic pelvic pain. we have to think that a possibility of endometriosis. That's how you are going to reduce the earlier diagnosis can be done by that. So when all these patients who are presenting to us with chronic pelvic pain, repeated pain and all, we have to keep in mind that a possibility of endometriosis. So that's the only way we can reduce the time to diagnosis of endometriosis.